Welcome back to another Vulkan tutorial. Continuing right from where we left off last time, navigate to your pipeline header. In our PipelineConfigInfo struct, we need to explicitly set the values configuring how the different stages of our pipeline work. So let's start with the input assembler by adding a member of type VK_PipelineInput_Assembly_State_createInfo, and we'll call it InputAssemblyInfo. Now back in our default PipelineConfigInfo function, we set the S type to VK_StructureType PipelineInput_Assembly_State_createInfo. Next we set the topology member to be VK_PrimitiveTopology triangle list, and then the primitive restart enable value to VK_false. So let's go over what these mean. This is the first stage of our pipeline and takes as input a list of vertices and groups them into geometry. In a previous video, I gave an example of a triangle being represented by 6 numbers, but what the input assembler stage sees is a list of numbers broken up into chunks by vertex. Note that we're not just limited to passing in positions per vertex. We can really specify any data we want and choose how we want to interpret it later within the vertex shader. But how does the input assembler know that I wanted these 3 vertices to be a triangle and not say something like a line instead? That's what we specify in the topology. In this case, by default, we will use a triangle list, which means that every 3 vertices are grouped together into a separate triangle. So if we added vertices 4, 5, and 6, we'd have 2 triangles. Another option is a triangle strip, where every additional vertex uses the previous 2 vertices to form the next triangle. This has the benefit of letting us specify more triangles without having to waste memory duplicating vertices, but limits the geometry that we can show to being a connected strip of triangles. This leads us into the next member, primitive restart enable. By setting this to true, when using a strip variant of topology, we can break up a strip by inserting a special index value into an index buffer. Some other possibilities include point lists, line lists and strips, and triangle fans, but for now we'll stick to just using simple triangle lists. If you want to avoid a bit of upcoming typing, you can grab the rest of the default PipelineConfigInfo implementation from the PasteBin link in the description below, or from the GitHub repo. First, I'm going to just copy and paste in my entire PipelineConfigInfo struct. Each of these members needs to be properly initialized, which will do so in our default PipelineConfigInfo helper function. So back in our function, let's start with configuring our viewport and our scissor. The viewport describes the transformation between our pipeline's output and our target image. Back in tutorial 2, in our vertex shader, we used the reserved variable GLPosition to output the corners for our triangle. I also mentioned back then how these positions required x and y values in the continuous range of -1 to 1. However, images are represented by pixels, with the top left corner being at 0, 0, and the bottom right at the image's width and height. So our viewport tells our pipeline how we want to transform our GLPosition values to the output image. So for example, we can render this triangle, but if we change this to render to only the top half of the display, our entire triangle is still rendered, but it is squished into the top half. Min depth and max depth are the depth range for the viewport, and similarly will be used to linearly transform the Z component of GLPosition. Now the scissor is kind of like the viewport, but instead of squishing our triangle, it cuts. Any pixels outside of the scissor rectangle will be discarded. So back to our triangle example. If we set the scissor to include only the top half of the screen, only the top half of our triangle would be drawn. We then have to combine our viewport and scissor into a single viewport state createInfo variable. On some graphics cards, it is possible to use multiple viewports and scissors by enabling a GPU feature, but we'll stick to using just one. Okay, moving on to our rasterization stage. This stage breaks up our geometry into fragments for each pixel our triangle overlaps. So as always, we set the struct type member first. Next we have a depth clamp enable setting. What this setting does is it forces the Z component of GLPosition to be between 0 and 1. values less than 0 are clamped to 0, and values greater than 1 are clamped to 1. Usually we don't want this to be true, because if a value is less than 0, it is kind of like something being behind the camera. And when z is greater than 1, it's like being too far away to see. So keep this false for now. Note that using this requires enabling a GPU feature. I'm going to mostly just focus on describing settings that are relevant to us now, or in the near future. If there's a member variable that you'd like to know about in more detail, it is easy to look up a term in the official documentation, and I recommend starting to do so, as getting used to reading the documentation will be very helpful in the long run. So, rasterizer discard enable discards all primitives before rasterization, so you'd only ever use this in situations where you only want to use the first few stages of the graphics pipeline. Polygon mode is for when drawing triangles. Do we want to draw just the corners, the edges, or the triangle filled in? Line width is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, now cull mode. This is something that matters. We can optionally discard triangles based on their apparent facing, also known as winding order. This is determined by the order of the 3 vertices making up the triangle, as well as their apparent order on screen. For example, to determine which face we are looking at, walk around the triangle in the order we specified our vertices. If we provided vertex 0, vertex 1, and then vertex 2, then we would be seeing the clockwise face. By swapping the order we provide any 2 of the 3 vertices, we can swap the winding order to the opposite direction. Additionally, the face we're looking at depends on our point of view. Without changing the order of the vertices, if we were to change our point of view to look at the other side, it has the opposite winding order. Therefore, we can use this property to uniquely identify which side of a triangle we are seeing. We need to specify whether we want to use the clockwise direction or the counterclockwise direction as the front face, and then if we want to cull the front or back faces. For now, we will use none as our default so that we don't accidentally cull our first triangle. Backface culling can result in some pretty big performance benefits and is something we'll come back to soon. Lastly, depth bias can be used to alter depth values by adding a constant value or by a factor of the fragment's slope. We won't use this for a while, so leave this disabled. Multi-sampling is a topic we'll cover in a future video, but relates to how the rasterizer handles the edges of geometry. Without multi-sampling enabled, a fragment is considered either completely in or completely out of a triangle based on where the pixel's center is. But this can result in some ugly visual artifacts known as aliasing, where the edges of objects look jagged. MSA is a method where multiple samples are taken along the edges of geometry to better approximate how much of the fragment is contained by the triangle, and then based on this, shading the pixel by a variable amount. Color blending controls how we combine colors in our frame buffer. If we have 2 triangles overlapping, then our fragment shader will return multiple colors for some pixels in our frame buffer. Here, we can optionally enable color blending and set the values determining how we mix the current output with the color value already in the frame buffer, if any. Mixing occurs based on something like this. We'll come back to this in more detail once we start working with transparency. And finally, we have depth testing. So a depth buffer is an additional attachment to our frame buffer that stores a value for every pixel, just like how our color attachment stores the color. Previously, I've compared depth values to being like the layers in an image editing program, but this analogy isn't exactly true. A depth buffer doesn't keep track of individual layers, but only the depth value to whatever fragment is currently on top for each pixel. For example, let's say so far we have rendered some mountains and our color buffer looks like this. Then the matching depth buffer would look something like this, where light shades are far away and darker shades correspond to a fragment being closer. Now if we wanted to draw a cloud, what would happen is that for each pixel of the cloud, we check its depth against the current values in the depth buffer. We only update the color and depth buffers for pixels where the cloud is the closest fragment. So in this case, if our cloud had a depth of around 0.8, then it is less than the sky's value, but greater than the mountains. Any of the cloud's fragments behind the mountains are simply discarded. Alright, that is it for our default pipeline configuration. But if you look back into our struct, we have two more values that have not yet been set, the pipeline layout and the RenderPass. We don't provide any default for these members, and we'll set them outside of the function. Okay, so now it's time to complete our createGraphicsPipeline function. Let's replace these lines outputting our code size and instead initialize our shader modules. Call createShader module and pass it in our vertex code and a pointer to our vertShader module. Then copy and paste to do the same for our fragment shader. Now we need to set just a couple more create infos for the vertex shader stage and fragment shader stage. So create a new local variable of type VKPipelineShaderStage createInfo, which will be an array of size 2, and we'll call it shader stages. Now set the first instance's S type to VKStructureType PipelineShaderStage createInfo. Then we need to set the stage member, which says that this shader stage is for the vertex shader, with VKShaderStage vertex bit. Next, set the module member variable to equal vertShader module, and then pName to equal main. This is the name of our entry function in our vertex shader. Then set flags to 0, we won't be using any, and pNext and pSpecializationInfo to be null pointers. SpecializationInfo is a mechanism to customize shader functionality and will be covered in a future video. Now copy and paste this, doing the same for our fragment shader. Make sure to change the member stage variable to be a VKShaderStage fragment bit instead of vertex, and the module member variable to equal fragShader module. Next, create a new local variable of type VKPipelineVertexInputState createInfo called VertexInputInfo. This struct is used to describe how we interpret our vertex buffer data that is the initial input into our graphics pipeline. We need to set its S type to VKStructureType PipelineVertexInputState createInfo. Then set the vertex attribute description and vertex binding description counts to 0, since for now we've hard-coded vertex data directly into the shader and therefore aren't supplying any data as of yet. Also set pVertex attribute descriptions and pVertex binding descriptions to null pointers. And now finally, we have our VKGraphicsPipeline createInfo, which will use all of this configuration we just went through to create our actual graphics pipeline object. Make a new local variable PipelineInfo and set its S type to VKStructureType GraphicsPipeline createInfo. Next, set the member variable stage count to 2 and pStages to our shader stages array. The stage count is to specify how many programmable stages our pipeline will use. So in our case, for now, we just have the vertex and fragment shaders. Next, we need to wire up our pipeline createInfo to our config.info. This is a bit tedious, but because we've separated our configuration from our pipeline creation, we should only have to do this once now, and then can use this code whenever we want to create different pipelines in the future. So go through and set each member in our PipelineInfo struct to the corresponding createInfo in our PipelineConfigInfo. For your viewport state, make sure you use the config.info viewport info, not configinfo.viewport. And for the color blend state, use configinfo.colorblendinfo, not the color blend attachment. And for pDynamic state, just specify a null pointer. This is an optional setting used to configure some pipeline functionality, such as line width or the viewport dynamically, without needing to recreate the pipeline. We'll probably use this at some point in the future. Finally, also pass through our pipeline layout, RenderPass, and subpass index to our createInfo. We haven't configured these values yet, so when we run our program, we'll get an error. We also have two more parameters, base pipeline handle and base pipeline index, which I only mention now for completeness. These can be used when trying to optimize performance. It can be less expensive for a GPU to create a new graphics pipeline by deriving from an existing one, but we're not going to worry about this for now. And now in an if statement called VKCreateGraphicsPipelines, we pass in our device, a null handle for our pipeline cache. This is another possible performance optimization. Next, for our pipeline count, just 1, and then a pointer to our pipeline info. We're not using any allocation callbacks yet, so just a null pointer here, and for the last parameter, a pointer to our graphics pipeline handle. Check that this is not equal to VK success, otherwise throw a runtime error that our graphics pipeline has failed to be created successfully. And before we forget, let's scroll up to underneath the constructor to implement a destructor to clean up our Vulkan objects. Use VK destroy shader module to clean up both our vertex and fragment shader modules. And then VK destroy pipeline on our Vulkan graphics pipeline handle. Lastly, in our pipeline header, remove the empty body for our destructor. So at this point, your code should compile, but when I try running it, it crashes because I haven't yet provided a pipeline layout or a RenderPass. But this is a good example of how the validation layers our device file set up for us can help us debug our code. If you look at the first validation layer message, it says VK create graphics pipelines, required parameter p createInfos.layout specified as VK null handle. So we have the function call where the error occurred, in this case VK create graphics pipelines, and it tells us that we've passed a null value for our layout parameter. Just below we have a similar message saying we did the same, but in this case for our RenderPass. But then below that is a message I didn't expect. So let's look into what it says. If our rasterizer discard enable is false, multisample state must not be null. So I do remember setting up our multisample state createInfo in our pipeline config, but let's take a look back in our createGraphicsPipeline function. And yep, right here I forgot to connect my multisample state info. So just below my rasterization state, I'll add a line for my multisample state. Now, if we try building and running again, we can see that the validation layer message has gone. Now, let's make these requirements just a little more explicit by first including CAssert at the top of our file. And then at the start of our createGraphicsPipeline function, add an assertation to check that our pipeline layout provided in the PipelineConfigInfo is not a null handle. And similarly, let's copy and paste this and do the same for our RenderPass. Now if we build and run, it's unambiguous that we haven't properly set up our config info yet, because we're missing a pipeline layout and a RenderPass. And that's where we'll leave things for today. In the very next video, we will have drawn our first triangle, and from then on our results will be much more visual. We will continue to work with pipelines a lot over the course of this video series, which will help reinforce the operations of each stage that were introduced today. Many of the parts we only briefly covered today will get their own dedicated videos, diving into their functionality in more detail in order to get new visual results. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you're finding these tutorials helpful, please like and subscribe.